Hello, everyone, and welcome. This conversation with Luke and myself was recorded for Luke's new podcast, and it was an honor to be a guest of his for once. Usually he's always a guest of ours, but I got to be on his podcast. We were talking about separation. He was talking to the majority male listeners who have caused the injury in the relationship, who have been the betrayers in the relationship. And we were talking about the importance of why separation can be beneficial and, if not necessary, as part of the healing and reintegration of the relationship when it's time for that. I shared a few thoughts, answered a few questions. I thought it would be helpful to air that episode on our podcast. And at the end of our conversation, I want to offer just a few more thoughts to go along with this idea of separation and why it's important for the one who betrayed to honor the request of space from the partner if that request is being made. So that's kind of the topic and the gist of the conversation today. I'm going to add a few more thoughts at the end. Without further ado, here is the conversation between Luke Gordon and myself.
I have a question for you. What do you think about a spouse that says, "Hey, we need to separate," or "I'm thinking about separation"? Hey, maybe you've already had this happen to you. Maybe you know of somebody that's happened to. Maybe you're afraid it might happen to you. You're considering it. So there's something that we're going to talk about today, and I'm excited to talk to you. So I've had a previous recording that is that I did with Amy Woolsey. She's a coach at Choose Recovery Services. She does phenomenal work. I have so much respect for her. She works with betrayed partners specifically. One of her strengths is really identifying problematic patterns inside of a relationship. And I recognize that with the men that I work with, when their partner goes to see somebody like Amy, I get so excited for them specifically because I recognize stuff's going to start to shift and it's going to feel really scary to begin with. And then it has some opportunities for some real upside, depending on the kind of work that they do in their journey. So I'm excited for you to listen to her speak today because I want to know what comes up for you. And I'd like to just invite you to hopefully you get a nugget or two of something you've never considered about separation, specifically the why behind it, because it really matters. I know that the people that did the betraying, when their spouse says, "I need separation," it feels like the end. And we're going to talk about why there could be a different paradigm shift, why there needs to be a paradigm shift or the opportunity for a paradigm shift around the purpose of the separation. So anyway, here we go. So here's what's on my mind today. What's on my mind today, and Amy, this is why I'm so glad that you're here with us, because we work with couples. I'm working with the person that's betraying. You're working with betrayed. We often do this work together and we enter the same space. And they got this thing where men are scared to death because one of the things their partner's asking for is they're asking for a separation. They're asking to have time apart. And and it's so scary. They're like, "Luke, this is the end." She's asking for it. She doesn't like me. She doesn't want me. She wants it out. She didn't want it over. Can you provide any clarity for maybe men that are listening to this and that's what they're experiencing? Can you talk to that?
I think coming from the perspective of working with the partner, what I am doing is when my client is experiencing activation, when they're emotionally activated because their partner is continuing to injure them in multiple ways, in order for my client to get any sense of reality, real reality, not the reality that her partner was keeping her in with his abusive behaviors and communication, to hide what was happening. So for her to get any sense of real reality, she needs to have space so that she can start connecting to her body. Trauma disconnects you, mind, body, brain, spirit, all of that. So we've got to reconnect. And that's how I explain it to my clients. Is we got to put you back together, because when you're living in fight, flight, freeze and those trauma responses, you're not in that window of tolerance. You're not able to actually be present with what is. And in order for them to make a conscious, educated, empowered choice, they need to see things as they really are. And when there's so much gaslighting behaviors of different methods, tactics, and techniques happening, they need that space where their partner might not be recognizing that they're even doing those behaviors, but that's not their job to help them recognize it. So they need the space so that they can start going, okay, what's going on? What am I really feeling? So they can start leaning in and trusting their body. And what I see happen the most when you're asking, like, okay, but then the guy starts freaking out. The relational tension typically starts to happen when my clients start doing the emotional healing for themselves and creating a healthy relationship with themselves. That absolutely creates relational tension.
Mhm.
And I think that on my side, when I'm letting my partners know, is good, because you have to create the tension that is ripping the old patterns and behaviors to shreds. Because in order to have the new relationship that we'll just give benefit of the doubt for most of these men listening that want, but if they're wanting this same relationship, and my partners will say that too, but I just want things to go back to the way they were. No, no, no. We need to rip to shreds with that tension that emotional healing and emotional maturity does, to shred the old patterns, including the destructive behaviors and patterns, so that we can create new. And in order to do that, we got to separate.
So basically, you have to if you compare this to house, you have to rip out the foundation. You have to rip everything out. You have to take everything, clear it out to put anything back in. And you're saying if you're together and there's that old stuff in there, then you can't. So that's what a separation could provide is getting rid of the old.
It needs to. It requires it.
So that's a part of the healing journey.
Absolutely.
That's a
Ah,
part of the healing journey is getting those old patterns out. And this separation always need to happen with this, or when
I
is the
yet to see it not. I mean, just speaking from experience, I have yet to see it work sustainably without a period of space and separation. Because again, especially when there's these destructive behaviors, methods, tactics, and techniques, it's such a tongue twister happening, there needs to be space for her system to regulate and get back online. And there's, again, that's so nuanced depending on the level of destructive behaviors that are happening in those 8 domains of the relationship. Depending on the level of destruction, then that would depend on the space and the type of space, whether it's a therapeutic separation, whether we're just in-house, or whether we're just creating really good healthy boundaries, like limiting certain topics of communication. Whatever that separation looks like, I think is nuanced. And that's why you would want to get professional help to help navigate what that actually looks like.
Okay, so I want to highlight a couple pieces here that I'm just loving about this conversation. For men, I want to bring it on my own experience for the men listening is it scared me anytime Alana would separate or create distance from me because I would lose what I would feel like is the ability for her to see me improve or get better. And those were on my good days, right? On my bad days, I didn't want her to lose sight of me and what I was doing because I lost control to show her what was happening.
Exactly. Exactly. And the analogy that you were talking about before with the house and the roots and kind of like pull up the foundation, you said foundation, my brain said roots. But what you're saying right there, I think is really key, because what we want to look at is that fear that you're talking about that you see men have and that I see women have just as much for different maybe reasons. But either way, that fear is related to your own individual roots, not the relational roots. And that's why we need space, because
So,
your work requires you to get into your roots. And what
okay.
happens is the partner is wanting to fix the relational roots and keeps pulling her back in. And she doesn't have her own roots grounded and anchored in because they've been yanked out.
So let's tie this back in because I feel like all the work with them with men is around that attachment, that family of origin stuff. That's what we're talking about. So if you think about a child starts out and they're highly dependent on their parents. And in a really, really healthy parent, creates an environment where they have that independence and they really get sure of themselves and go, I don't need my mom or my dad. I'm good on my own. And then that really healthy, independent teenager that turns into a young adult then finds a relationship and they're really healthy of themselves. So the separation, that's what I loved what you said, Amy. Separation is the roots of the relationship. Separation is about the roots of the individual. And it's so cool.
Absolutely.
I can't do that with my partner who I've attached to in unhealthy ways. I can't do it.
No, and it's not the partner who's been betrayed. It's not her responsibility. I'm going to quote Sarah Morales here. It is not her responsibility to provide the climate that is necessary to grow trust and healing.
Yeah.
She does not need to be the one to provide this climate in the relationship so that her partner can prove that he is trustworthy and that healing can happen. That has to be his work and his responsibility. It is her sacred responsibility to demand evidence that he is, in fact, doing the work, not just saying the words that have been used against her, that the words that have been used to gaslight her and create this false reality. So she needs to take that space so that she can start looking for the evidence that, as you're working with the men, you're showing them, here's how you can do the work actionably.
Yeah. Love that. And just to maybe gross some men out here, my goal is to gross you out of here. I'm going to attempt to. Okay. So think about your whole entire life and think about the relationship dynamics that existed. Who was responsible to create a warm, safe environment for you? Who was? Right? I'm trying to listen to you talk, and I'm picturing you thinking about that. And if you saying your wife, grow gross, because when I say no, that was your parents' job, that was your mom's job. Okay. And then do you really want to be like in an intimate relationship with your mom? Right? Do you want that to be put on your spouse? Right? Of that warm, comforting environment to be created by the person that you're intimately, physically connected to. Because that is so not appropriate.
No.
Um, you know, we get that. And hey, I gotta tell you, that's what I wanted. There is something that I got, love my parents to death, but there is something that Alana, my spouse, provided for me that felt so good because I knew she right away, she was warm and she was inviting and she was receptive. And she just, I could tell her my broken parts and she didn't run away. And it felt so good. And the problem is I didn't heal emotionally, that I attached to that in the wrong way, which is said, okay, now this is your job. Your job is to keep giving me this. Right? No, that was just her with her wonderful grown up human part of her that she was showing me. But I grabbed on, latched onto it because I didn't get that parts of that in my family of origin and attached to it. And then now that was an expectation for her to provide that for me because I never got it for myself.
Exactly. And that's the individual roots of healing that we're talking about that need to be done and require space to do it. Again, whatever that space requires for you to do that work. And I think that alone is, again, very nuanced and individual. If you're deeply ingrained in that kind of attachment, unhealthy attachment, then it might require a significant amount of space and time so that you can do that individual work. I guess I just want to acknowledge the fear that you're talking about these men having when they do take that space. What if they lose? Again, I hear that on my end too. And what I'll say to my clients is whether you take this space now or not, at some point, time, life will create it for you because it's not sustainable. And that's why you all are here listening to Luke. Is it something blew up because the unsustainable connection that isn't healthy is over. So you can continue on this road or you can take the required time to do the work. And, you know, everybody wants the hope that the work that you're doing individually can lead you back together. but it's also a risk that is, I think, your responsibility to take because of the injury that you caused.
So good. So good. Yeah. And I just thank you, Amy. And just that separations can be healing separations, a part of the journey that Amy, you very boldly, and appreciate you saying that is the pathway through to healing. The longer I push back and I say to my spouse, no, we can't have this space. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen with the end of a relationship, or it's
Right.
going to happen with the building of a new healthy relationship. So
Yeah.
anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I
Yeah.
really appreciate
Okay, so I hope you were able to get some nuggets out of that. One of the things that I value about having Luke as a colleague and doing what he does so well with men is the way that he can talk to them. And sometimes I think when we have him on our podcast, just hearing how he might be talking to the betrayer, I think sometimes gives us even more insight to what's going on and how to navigate this. But a couple more thoughts that came up for me around this topic that I think might be useful to add to this conversation and maybe reinforce why this is so important to have space. Like I was saying in the interview, the type of space and the space that you get is going to look different for everybody. But a couple things that come to my mind right off the bat is number one, the physical space. And when the betrayer respects the need for his partner to have a physical separation, have physical space, what this is doing is allowing their partner to get that sense of safety that they're requesting, that they're asking, that they're looking for, rather than making it mean something about them. And that's why Luke does such great work. He helps men understand at a deeper level where their fear of this separation might be coming from. And you heard us talk about that. But this is so important and essential to have some physical space sometimes for you, the partner who was betrayed, to begin the healing process without the constant presence and pressure of the person who caused you the harm, especially when there's still destructive behaviors happening, especially, right? Now you're just constantly being re-injured. Emotional space is another thing to help establish safety and trust. When your partner respects and honors your request for emotional space, what they're doing is allowing you the freedom to process your emotions and feelings without pressure. It's acknowledging that your emotional state needs time to stabilize, and that you deserve that space to grieve, to process, and to understand your emotions that you are newly coming to awareness around. Remember, this is why the term betrayal violence resonates with me because you just had a reality collapse. What you thought was real and how you were adapting and bonding to your partner, the reality of your relationship, the reality of your entire life has now collapsed. You need time to wrap your head around what is actually the reality. And it takes time for your emotions, for your body to catch up to the emotional trauma that you just experienced. So, giving you space to do that absolutely helps establish trust, right? When they don't, then it feels like, okay, I can't trust you. It doesn't feel safe because you're not giving me what I'm asking for. And you absolutely, again, you deserve the space to grieve, to process, and understand these emotions that you're just starting to recognize. The other thing that is most common to ask space for is the sexual intimacy space. After betrayal, sexual intimacy can feel re-traumatizing and evasive. So when the one who betrayed respects the space, it is critical to help avoid further emotional and psychological harm here. When this is where the injury often cuts the deepest. I know for me personally, the sexual injury, like the actual physical act of having sex, took a lot longer for me to heal and process through some of that trauma and shock residue. It took a lot longer than I actually anticipated, all the way into my second relationship, which that second relationship didn't have any sexual injury in. And yet it took my body a significant amount of time to be ready to process that. I think everybody's different, but for me, I was kind of shocked how long it took my body to reintegrate back into that sexual experience without it being absolutely frozen or triggered or traumatized. I remember telling my therapist years ago that I was ready to kind of tackle this. Like, all right, I'm ready. Let's tackle the sexual abuse, kind of go there. And we went in all kinds of different directions for years before, in all honesty, my body was ready to process this. So please be patient with yourself here as well, especially around the space for sexual intimacy. And I just don't think we talk about this enough either. There's this level of expectation that I think we put on ourselves to kind of get back into that sexual intimacy. I think there's a safety there to get back into the sexual intimacy. I know for me, in my previous relationship, if we were having sex, then that meant that, okay, we're good. I'm okay. He's okay. We're okay. It was obviously a false sense of security and safety, but that's all I knew because I didn't understand all the different levels of intimacy that go into a relationship, right? When you are asking for space in sexual intimacy, it's absolutely valid and it definitely establishes safe and trust again when it is respected and honored. This request is respected and honored. Another way that making a request for space can really be beneficial is because it does help facilitate healing and that self reflection. It's okay and important to need time to reconnect back to yourself, understand your worth and value, maybe start believing that you actually have 100% of worth and value, that you really are enough just as you are. Taking time to cultivate that belief for yourself, rebuilding your sense of identity independently from the relationship is really important. And separation can be a time to do a lot of that deep personal growth and self discovery. It also helps prevent re traumatization. When you are continuously in the same proximity with the one who betrayed you without proper boundaries, then it can lead to that re traumatization. And now you're impending your healing process. You're stunting it, you're halting it, which when that happens, we're now just increasing the PTSD symptoms, right? This is what happens sometimes when my clients are wanting to trust again and they are leaning back into trusting their partner too quickly, right? Without watching and waiting and looking for the consistency over time. When we rush that a little bit too quickly, we get re-traumatized. We're wanting to avoid that, and getting space helps avoid re-traumatizing. That's the last thing that we wanna do. We've already had such significant trauma and injury. We wanna do everything that we can do to help protect from being re-injured. Space can give you that opportunity to go, "Hold on a second, I need to regroup. I need to reconnect. I need to kind of gather my wits about myself here so that I can put things in place within what I can control to help prevent as much as I can control being re-traumatized." Then another way that I think this helps the healing process is reestablishing that autonomy. When you have your request for space respected, it helps you regain that sense of control over your life. Because remember, with this reality collapse, you're recognizing that you didn't have control over your life, that someone else had control over your life because they had information about your life, your body, your relationship that you didn't have. All of that was lost during and after the betrayal. It is so critical to reestablish this sense of autonomy and control and power that you do have as an individual and as a human, that you have a human right to. Now, if we're talking to the betrayer, I think this also, the space when you respect her request for space, this is a great opportunity for you to do reflection, your own self reflection, and step into that responsibility and accountability for your choices that led to this situation to begin with. That is such a healthy, healing part of this process. Learning to understand the impact of your behavior and take responsibility for that behavior. It's a chance for you to work on your issues with your therapist and coach to get help understanding what led to this to begin with. When you feel like Luke was talking about, when you feel the panic or the fear that your partner is making this request and the fear that comes with honoring and giving that request, that's what you take to your professional because there's so much underneath there that's showing up that we want to look at. We don't want to ignore what's coming up there. This also is a great way to demonstrate respect and commitment to healing and commitment to helping your partner heal. When you respect your partner's need for space. It shows genuine respect for her boundaries and her request, that you're committed to her well-being and the relationship's potential recovery. It also, like I've been saying, it helps rebuild trust. Once that trust is broken, it absolutely takes time to rebuild, as you've heard us talk about so many times. And so when you honor the space that she's asking for, you're showing that you're willing to put in the work to rebuild that trust the way that she needs you to rebuild it. This is foundational for any possible potential reconciliation. It is a must. Now, when it's not respected, just a few thoughts here. What does it mean if your space is not respected? Well, a lot of things, but I'll just touch on a few. It means there's a lack of respect and a lack of empathy. If your partner is unwilling to honor the space that you're requesting, it indicates a lack of respect for your needs and what you need in this healing process. And when you see that lack of respect, notice what comes up for you. Notice maybe how you are coping with the grief around that reality and bring that to your professional. It can also mean that there's continued control and manipulation happening. There's control showing up on both sides of the street, right? When one person feels that lack of control that they feel like they need to hold on to, then we as humans have some really gnarly coping mechanisms here. And when there's that sense of like, oh my gosh, if I give her space, I don't have as much control to control the narrative or whatever that looks like, however that's showing up. Ultimately, when you're not willing to give her the space she requested, you're trying to control and manipulate the situation. And I think that because there's already been abuse to keep her hidden from your behaviors, this is a really, really important piece that is absolutely necessary to get curious about for yourself and why you feel this sense of need to control, whether it's to continue to hide her from your behaviors or what else is coming up. And again, that's what you take to your professional. And then just overall, if you are not being given the space that you are asking for, if it's not being respected, it just hinders the healing process in general. It prolongs the emotional distress and it makes the idea of reconciliation that much harder to wrap your head around and have hope in. For those of you who have been betrayed, I just want you to know that in the midst of all of the pain that surrounds this experience that you're in the middle of, there really is an opportunity to rediscover your strength and reclaim your peace, because your worth is not defined by someone else's actions. You are powerful, you are resilient, and you are whole. And for the betrayer, true change starts with honoring the space needed for healing and taking responsibility for your actions. And growth happens when you face your mistakes with honesty and a genuine desire to make things right. Respecting her need for space can be the first step in rebuilding trust and showing your commitment to change. I hope this episode was inspiring for both. As always, thank you for joining and continue to choose healing, choose recovery, and choose you. Take care, everybody. No matter where you are at in your journey of healing, one way that I think would be really beneficial to take your healing up a level or two is join my Believing in You group membership. The ladies who are stepping into this membership and doing this work are making incredible changes. They are believing things about themselves, about their situation, about their relationships, about their future that they never thought they would believe. And it is the most inspiring, incredible thing to watch. I have designed this membership to really help push your brain into more awareness, because in order to actually change something, to change the result, we need to become aware of what is happening, what has been happening in the past and what's happening in the present. I have created so many opportunities for you to step into awareness, whether that's through the one-on-one coaching with me or in a group coaching setting, not a group support, but a group coaching setting. You are watching another human brain get coached. And when you watch your brain, watch another brain, you're getting double coached, which brings even more awareness. I teach a new tool or concept at the beginning of each session. Then there's worksheets galore, discount on brain spotting sessions, So much has been put into this membership to help those who join have every opportunity to take their healing to the level that they want. There are afternoon and evening sessions available. For more information, and if you are interested to register for that, head over to the show notes or go to chooserecoveryservices.com. And as always, continue to choose healing, choose recovery, and choose you. Take care, everybody.